All right, good morning, everybody. This open meeting of the Coastal Resilience Advisory Committee is being conducted remotely pursuant to Chapter 20 of the Acts of 2021. Please note this meeting is being recorded and that all attendees are participating via Zoom as posted on the town's website, identifying how the public may join. The public is encouraged to follow along using the posted agenda unless the chair notes otherwise. All supporting materials that have been provided to members of this body are available on the town's website unless otherwise noted. Ensuring public access does not ensure public participation unless such participation is required by law. This meeting will feature public comment. For this meeting, the Coastal Resilience Advisory Committee is convening by video conference. Please be aware that other people may be able to see you and take care not to share your device's screen. Anything you broadcast may be captured by the recording, and please silence all phones and devices. Members of the public wishing to participate in the meeting must use their full name for Zoom access. If full names are not used, people will not be allowed to participate in the discussion. The town reserves the right to remove any member of the public who acts inappropriately or who doesn't use their full name. I am Mary Longacre, Chair of the Coastal Resilience Advisory Committee. Permit me to confirm that all members and persons anticipated on the agenda are present and can hear me. Members, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. Sarah Boyce?
Here.
Peter Bryce?
Here.
Matt Fee?
Here.
Jen Carberg?
Here.
Joanna Roach?
Here.
I'll note that Gary Beller said that he's going to be joining us late today, and Ian Golding is not available today. Staff, when I call you, Vince?
Miss Matt.
No, I didn't. Matt said hello. Matt, if I'm wrong, correct me. Staff, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. Vince Murphy?
Here.
And Leah Hill?
Here.
Thank you. We do not have outside speakers anticipated today. So before we turn to the first item on the agenda, permit me to cover some ground rules for effective and clear conduct of our business and to ensure accurate meeting minutes. The chair will introduce each speaker on the agenda. After they conclude their remarks, the chair will go down the list of members, inviting each by name to provide any comment, questions, or motions. Please hold until your name is called. Further, please remember to mute yourself on your phone or computer when you are not speaking. For any response, please wait until the chair yields the floor to you and state your name before speaking. If members wish to engage in a conversation with other members, please do so through the chair, taking care to identify yourself. And for items with public comment, after members have spoken, the chair will afford public comment to those members of the public who have joined the meeting via Zoom. Members of the public who wish to speak must state their names and be acknowledged by and speak through the chair. If you're not able to participate in the remote meeting, you may also submit comments to the Coastal Resilience Coordinator, Vince Murphy, to be read into the meeting record. His email is vmurphy@nantucket-ma.gov. And finally, each vote taken in this meeting will be conducted by a roll call vote. Okay. Good morning, everyone. The first item on our agenda is announcement of changes to the membership of the Coastal Resilience Advisory Committee. Fritz McClure has resigned from the Planning Board, and as the representative from the Planning Board on this committee, he has also resigned from this committee, effective immediately. The Planning Board will likely appoint a replacement in their June meeting, but until then, that seat is simply empty for this committee. In addition to that, we had our request to the Select Board approved for expansion for 2 additional seats, one to be occupied by a representative from the Land Bank and the other to be occupied by a representative from either the Finance Committee or the Capital Program Committee. And we also had our request to be established as a permanent committee approved by the Select Board. That means that the at-large seats will be open for reappointment, and there will be staggered terms. So one person will be appointed for 1 year, one for 2 years, and one for 3 years, and then once every 3 years, Each seat will renew every 3 years, with one seat renewing every year. Those seats are open to the public to apply, and you can visit the town's website for more information on that process. Vince, can you take the agenda down so I can see everybody just for a moment there? Great. I do want to make sure that we have the opportunity to provide a letter of thank you to Fritz for his service for almost 3 years on the Coastal Resilience Advisory Committee, not the least for taking the minutes for most of those meetings. We appreciate that very much. Did we have a motion to draft a letter which I would sign?
So moved.
Thank you, Matt. Do we have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Jen. So a quick roll call vote. Is there any other discussion before a vote? So Sarah Boyce,
Aye.
Peter Bryce. Peter, you're on mute.
Aye.
Thank you. Matt Fee,
Aye.
Jen Carberg,
Aye.
Joanna Roach,
Aye.
and Mary Longacre, aye. Thank you all, and thank you, Fritz. That does bring up the need for a new secretary to take the minutes for the meetings. Do we have nominations? I think Peter had expressed an interest. Peter, again, you're on mute.
Yes, I volunteer.
Thank you. Any other volunteers? If none, I'll take a motion to appoint Peter Bryce as secretary for the Coastal Resilience Advisory Committee.
So moved, and thank you, Peter.
Second.
Thank you, Jen and Sarah, for seconding. Any further discussion? Roll call vote. Sarah Boyce,
Aye.
Peter Bryce,
Aye.
Matt Fee,
Aye.
Jen Carber,
Aye.
Joanna Roach,
Aye.
and Mary Longacre, aye. So Vince, Peter was acting as vice chair. Do we need to also appoint a vice chair? Or do we have any volunteers for that position?
I appreciate that the committee has just voted on this. I wonder if Peter could just be the acting secretary until we have to renew all 3 positions in July.
If we have that option, that works for me. Okay, I'm seeing nods. So we'll clear that, I guess, with the town admin. Make sure that that's okay. And that sounds like a great way to proceed. Okay, so the next item on our agenda is the request from the Natural Resources Department for a letter of support for the Sacaja Pond Municipal Vulnerability Preparedness Grant. Their brief summary of their application and a outline for what a letter of support would cover are in the packet. And Leah Hill is here from the Natural Resources Department to provide an introduction to the project.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for having me. I'll just give a brief summary about the project. This project, the Natural Resources has been working on since 2017. So we have baseline data collected, dive surveys, some conceptual design plans, etc. And we actually got a CZM grant for it a couple years ago, but due to COVID and a couple administrative snafus, we couldn't use that whole grant for what we wanted to. So we are going to be applying for an MVP grant for this project, and it will incorporate reef balls, which are concrete structures in the water, which provide habitat to oysters. It also provides some areas for fish to kind of swim in and out of. And then we will be building up a living shoreline between the pond and where Pulpus Road eroded away a couple years ago. So right now there's just Jersey barriers there. It was kind of like a quick fix, 3 years ago now. And also some work was done on that was illegal. So we're hoping to rectify that with this project and build up the coastal bank between the pond and the road to create a nature-based solution to erosion and climate change things that we're going to see. It'll also have some native plants planted along there, and then hopefully some marsh plants as well to build up the marsh area between the living shoreline and the water. So we're hoping that you guys can write a letter of support for this project and just kind of describe in that letter how it would meet some of the goals in the plan, and then how it would kind of help the community as a whole.
Great, thank you, Leah. So my suggestion would be that the committee authorize Vince and me to draft and then sign that letter. But we'd certainly want to take any input on particular points that wanted to be emphasized in the letter. Or if anybody has any objection to sending the letter, this is also the time to say so. Any thoughts from committee members? Jen?
Thank you, Mary. I'm happy with authorizing you guys to write it and send it. I think it's really great for us to support this project, and the outline of the potential kind of content for the letter, I think really highlights all the key points I would want to mention, anyways, particularly the education about, nature-based solutions and the possibility to use it as a pilot project that would hopefully be implemented other places around the island. We haven't done this yet on Nantucket, not like this. So I think it's a really good project to get us going.
Yeah, it's our hope to have it as a pilot project for the island, but also have it be transferable to other communities around the Commonwealth and, New England.
Yeah, absolutely.
That would be fantastic, Leah. Other comments or thoughts? Holly Backus?
Good morning. Sorry, my tardiness. Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to mention, one, very excited to see this, and two, I will, as an H&P coordinator for the town, will also write a letter of support for this great effort. As you probably all are aware, this is also within our H&P as a strategy from that lovely storm in 2018, and I got stranded because of it. So happy to see this moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Holly.
Other thoughts or questions? Vince?
Yeah, just a simple one. I'm thinking it out in my head right now. I'm guessing it's going to be on Natural Resource Department letterhead to say that it's the Home Department of the Coastal Resiliency Advisory Committee, and Mary would sign the letter on behalf of the committee. Would that be a fair assessment?
That's what I'm anticipating, yes. Yeah, and you and I can work out the specific language in the letter. But anything further on that topic? No, thank you, Leah, for joining us this morning, and thank you for putting the project forward.
Thank you for writing a letter. Okay. Have a good day.
Thank you. You're welcome.
Bye.
Vince?
Do you need to vote on it, or we can just do it by
Oh,
consensus?
thank you, Vince. So take a motion to authorize Vince and me to draft and me to sign the letter on behalf of the committee.
So moved.
Thank you, Sarah. Do we have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Jen. Any further discussion? A roll call vote. Sarah Boyce,
Aye.
Peter Bryce,
Aye.
Matt Fee,
Aye.
Jen Carberg,
Aye.
Joanna Roach,
Aye.
and Mary Longacre. Aye. Thank you. All right, our next presentation is from Vince on a new opportunity that he's discovered through the National Fish and Wildlife Fund. This is an early stage opportunity. So Vince, you want to tell us more about that?
Sure thing. Before I get going, kind of first a thank you and second a heads up. I might be asking Jen for some assistance. Jen and I are partnering on this through her role with Nantucket Conservation Foundation. So get that out in the open nice and early on. This is NIFWIF under the wonderful acronym of National Fish and Wildlife Foundation. They launched a pre-application grant that we've just applied for. We had to do it in a bit of a hurry. There was a deadline. The deadline was last Thursday for the pre-application. The way that this works is you do a pre-application, they review it. It has to be a specific length. It can be no more than 3 pages with some text box type information that has to go along with it. It is for their coastal resilience grants, and we're looking for one of their planning grants. We're bundling 3 different projects in together for this. So this it fits within the context of what this grant requires. That has to be said. It's not like we're just trying to pick 3 random things that would fit within it. These 3 fit quite well as part of this grant's rules, so to speak. There's the 3 projects, and one of my favorite ones in this is the Pulpus Road at Fulgers Marsh. This is one of those kind of critical things that it's already a kind of an undersized culvert. Jen can talk more about the impacts in the wetlands. I don't want to take that away from her, but it would benefit them as the main tenet of what I'm trying to get across. It would be to fulfill one of the items in the coastal resilience plan, to raise the level of the road, turn it into either a low bridge or a better sized culvert, get the level of the road out of the flood zone in 2070, as per the Massachusetts Coastal Flood Risk Model. And in my mind, I would say something along the lines of reduce the impacts of the road on the marsh. Then it would tie up with also another question for the Sacaja Pond at Pulpus Road at Sacaja Pond. The idea and the phrasing of the grant that we approached it with was that if anything happens to both of those locations, basically something like a quarter of the land mass or of Nantucket becomes isolated. So this is to reduce isolation risk. I must point out that the grant is for planning purposes. It will be to get designs. It's not to actually do any construction. Must say that upfront and quite openly. The idea at Sacaja Pond would be to raise the level of the road, would be one part of it, and increase the function of the causeway in that area. The causeway is a bit choked. The culverts in that area are basically choked and non-functioning, or at least are not functioning correctly. And this would do what the Coastal Resilience Plan said, to have better flow onto the upper Heathland area, Mass Audubon's the Heathland sanctuary. It would also, the third component of it would be a planning effort. It would get the plans and the designs for the construction phase that Leah was talking about for her MVP grant. So it's kind of approaching the same project, but in two ways. We would effectively do all three designs together, get the designs for the the reef balls and the living shoreline done together and at an earlier stage, so that the construction phase of the MVP grant could get underway a bit faster. So that was the outline of it. I must say that this is only a pre-application. There's the way that it works is you get invited at a later stage, and it just says in May. It doesn't say the beginning of May or the end of May. I don't know when. We will find out in May, quite simply, if we're going to be invited to undertake a full application. Full application is 8 pages. It's quite small, quite still. It was a bit of a challenge to get this together in under a week. I think we actually did it between Tuesday and early Thursday to get it all together, to get it completed and loaded onto the NIFWIF website. Thursday just gone. Jen, do you want to add anything to it?
Thanks, Vince. I think you summarized that pretty well. This is a really good grant opportunity for us to get in on. And as Vince mentioned, we're applying, they do money in bins. So there's, pre-design 30 to 60%, then there's final design and permitting, and then there's actual implementation. And so they give grant money for projects that fit within those categories. So getting in now on the design piece, and if we do get asked to submit and actually get this grant, then we're more likely to get the funding for the permitting piece and the actual implementation piece down the road. So it's a good opportunity to go after. And NCF is partnered because we own Folgers Marsh on either side of Pulpus Road. And so part of the work that we're asking for is designing restoration for the salt marsh, because it's been so impacted by the small culvert, restoration of the salt marsh so we make it more resilient, and also restoration of the dune that separates Folgers Marsh from Nantucket Harbor, because that'll increase some of the resiliency there as well. So it adds that ecological piece that Sacaja has. It adds the ecological piece to the Folgers Marsh crossing, and hopefully it'll make it a really attractive grant opportunity for the reviewers.
Great, thank you, Jen. I'll note that Gary Beller was able to join us about 10:15. Welcome, Gary.
So if I could just add a few more bits, it's probably one of the questions people will be asking. It's quite simple and straightforward, really. How much are we looking for this? I ended up having to cost this out in a very rough way. But we are currently at the moment budgeting it at about 650,000, with the town potentially putting up about, and NCF, about 10% of in-kind or potentially cash, but that might be just from the town side. Not going to commit NCF to cash at this point because we haven't even talked about it. But we would be doing an in-kind match of staff time and services would be the main way that we would try and do that 10% match, just to kind of sweeten the deal, I suppose, is one of the nicest ways of putting it at this point. When I went to upload all the information, I found quite late in the day on Thursday that there was a category where I could add maps, just so long as I kept it under a particular size. So I added in a whole bunch of maps that you might have seen in the packet. Some are from the Coastal Resilience Plan, others are from the draft concept plan that Leah developed for Sacaja Pond for the reef balls. And I also put in some of the maps from MCFRM to show the present flooding levels and the 2 future time zones of 2050 and 2070, what the flood might look like at that point, just to show the level of threat to that area and how it will cause isolation, and how sea level rise, it just causes more isolation for that whole quarter of Nantucket, for want of a better phrase. So it was just one of those things. Oh, they also asked questions, a whole load of questions about demographic information about the applicants. I had to make that about as accurate as I could at about 7 p.m. on a Thursday evening, when I couldn't even contact anyone in HR or NCF to fill that out. But I essentially just answered that in terms of the project team that we had put forward, which was myself, Leah, Thais, Jeff, and Jen here, Jen Carberg, and left it at that. I couldn't answer for the whole town department, or sorry, for the whole town or for NCF. But it's not something that they said was pertinent, but would help demonstrate if we were applying under a disadvantaged community. We never had to check that box anyway, so it doesn't affect us.
And Vince, what's the timeline for the eventual award if we're invited to apply, and then for the work to actually be done?
That was somewhat unclear. They said that you must start within 6 months of the award. So I couldn't find information when they said it would be applicable, when they would give the grant towards. So I gave an approximation in the middle of that 6 months. I said the start date would be October 1st, 2022, this coming October. And myself and Jeff Carlson, the Natural Resources Department Director, we estimated that it would take approximately 2 years, 18 months to 2 years. So we put the longer time frame on that one, have it completed within 2 years. It's only to get designs. So if it was shorter, all the better.
Thank you, Vince. Any comments or questions from committee members? Sarah?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. I just really want to applaud the efforts of this grant application, because I think this is exactly what we've been talking about with the collaboration between the municipal agency and private landowners, and then I'm assuming that it creates a good collaboration, that because it affects all parties and it benefits all parties. So I applaud that. But I also wanted to ask, as the Coastal Resiliency Advisory Committee, how can we further support this? Is there also a letter that would help you guys, or is this primarily an update? Is there something that you were asking for from us, or is this more of an update of like a next step for achieving some of the goals of the plan?
Vince?
Thank you, Mary. At the moment, this is kind of just an update. This is kind of the FYI section to say what we did, and the kind of advance notice, I guess, of if we get an email in May saying, hey, please apply for the full grant, that the committee now is aware that this is in the works. At the moment, this is in. There's nothing I can add to it unless I get unless we get the invitation. Then at that point, I can answer your questions better, Sarah.
Sarah, did you have a follow-up, or is that okay? Jen?
Thank you, Mary. I just wanted to add that it seems the way most of these kinds of grants go is that there is a very short turnaround window for a letter of intent, or like, here's my short one pager of why I should give you more information. It was the same with the in lieu fee program that I applied to and a couple other ones. So they come out and you have to send that out real quick, but then the period of putting together the fuller application, if you get invited back to do a full proposal, I think that's most likely when it will make sense for the committee to be able to give input, give help, letters of support, all that kind of stuff in those fuller application pieces. So.
Thank you, Jen. And Holly.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Awesome, guys, love this. And as you probably are already aware, this is also in the HMP. So when that time comes for that letter of support, I will be happy to write that.
Right. Thank you, Holly. Joanna?
So I will also share that the Ryan Mitchell Association applied for the grant through this program as well, in conjunction with Coastal Resilience, which, since I'm not representing the Ryan Mitchell Association on this committee, I won't discuss now, but Vince, I will call you later and give you an update.
Thank you.
Joanna. Further comments or questions on this particular item? All right, thank you, Vince, and thank you for the hard work. I had a little bit of a window onto that last week, and I appreciate all the extra hours. So next item on our agenda, also grants. So this is the CZM grant that we are going for the downtown flood barrier feasibility study and working with Arcadis, and Vince is presenting information that they have developed to date. And then Vince has some specific requests for us about this.
Thank you, Mary. So just to kind of recap it a tiny bit more, you might remember that this was the subject of a vote that the committee took, I think, in January, if I remember rightly, or it might have been early February, as to what the focus would be. This fulfills this that vote about how we're focusing on the downtown flood barrier. Just going to put everything out there. You might remember that at the time we thought we would be applying for MVP. Then we spoke with MVP and we spoke with CZM. CZM, as we found through our chats with Courtney Rocha on, I think it was February 22nd, and then on March 22nd, we spoke with Steve McKenna from CZM. CZM were just more receptive to it. It just made sense to change. It also then opened up the possibility for Natural Resource Department to look at MVP for something else, which, as you saw from Leah, turns out to be Sacaja Pond. Just put all that out there. That's a lot of background, but it explains what happened, how we switched. Any questions on that before I go in?
Don't see any. Go ahead, Vince.
Okay. Yeah, because that is a point I didn't want to cause confusion on. I want that to be out in the open. So we had a little bit of money left over to develop this. There's a good chunk of the money gone into this. I'm not really sure, a little bit less than half, to this background development. This isn't done. This isn't a finished article. I'm just going to be super clear on that. In the email I sent, I was trying to use a cake analogy. I'm going to keep that one off. It's not just for Matt Fee's benefit, it's just for everyone's benefit. This is a work in progress. CZM haven't even put out the rules yet. We're using last year's rules. They don't really change much from year to year, or if they do, it's only minor changes, and a lot of the time they don't make big ones, or hardly any. So what we're working with here is still a little bit of a misnomer until we see the rules, basically. So that's one thing to bear in mind. There's something like 11 sections in this. Some of them are pretty simple and straightforward, that are pretty much complete or near completion, characterizing the island, background information. Then there's about 3 sections that I have big questions for, that I don't have answers for yet, that committee input would very much benefit me on. Then there's other parts to it I don't have any answers for at all, the budgeting side of it. I'm still working through that with Arcadis, and that's still in the ballpark of 300,000. It might change a bit, but we're trying to firm up the budget a lot more. So I just can't speak to that section at all. But sections 5 about project description, if I could get feedback from committee members on that, if anyone had any notes. I have 3 sections. That's the first of 3. I guess with your permission, Mary, I'll turn that one to committee members if anyone wants to talk about project description.
Yeah, Vince, go ahead and list the 3 that you're looking for, and then we'll start with the
Sure
first.
thing. It's section 5, the project description, section 6, the public benefits and interests, and then section 10, the project management, but more specifically the partnership side of that. The project management will be mostly in-house through Natural Resources Department. It's the partnership I still have all the questions with, and I can hope that a lot of committee members in your organizations might put hands up there, please.
Okay, and so you wanted to start with section 5?
I can put it on screen if it helps.
Yeah, let's do that.
So did anyone have any questions in this section or any notes on it, or do you want me to just give kind of a brief? Well, there's not much to say really, it's just an overview.
So are there any comments or questions from committee members on this section? Hopefully people had a chance to take a look at what Vince sent last week. But also, Vince, you told me that there's no specific deadline at this point, that the grant application process hasn't opened. So while we do need to keep working on it, it's not like we have to give a reply to you, by 5 o'clock today. Is that correct?
Correct. So CZM said, if you might remember, that they were anticipating early April, been and gone, as the case may be. So I was hoping, honestly, that it would come out last Friday. It didn't. So yeah, it's not. I'm anticipating that the deadline will be sometime towards the end of June. That's a guess at this point.
So Gary, go ahead.
I just want to say that I agree with Vince completely that in the various discussions we've had on grant opportunities, Steve was so much more encouraging, and Courtney was so discouraging to listen to her, that I'm glad that you focused it the way you are. And I think that with the comments that Steve made, at least we have a fighting chance getting some of those funds. So I just say I really appreciated the fact that you made that decision. Thank you.
Thank you, Gary. I did have I guess, a question for Vince. So the title of the project that we have in the Coastal Resilience Plan is, Downtown Flood Barrier. And as I was reading this, with the idea of, getting a grant from an environmental perspective, the word barrier kind of jumped out at me, and it implies wall or hard structure. And, that's certainly, within the realm of what we're looking at for downtown. But I wondered if it's the right word to use, would flood prevention or flood mitigation or flood management be more favorably perceived than flood barrier?
Yeah, I think so, yes. Barrier has this kind of connotation, doesn't it? I appreciate that. I don't know that I have an answer. I'd happily take any community suggestions. I've actually just written down what Mary said. And I don't think I think it's how it was described in the CRP. It doesn't necessarily, once we can tie it to that in the CRP, that's all we really need to do. If it's a renaming exercise, I'm not going to fight over that at all. If it's something that would be more applicable to the grant as a resilience grant, then yes, then that would definitely make sense.
Matt, and then Peter.
It's a storm. It could be viewed as a storm surge barrier. It could be, depending how it's built, it could have, sort of public access along it, on top of it, etc. I mean, I think we could play up those aspects of it a bit.
And just a reminder, this is the land-based option in the Coastal Resilience Plan, not one of the hypothetical water-based barriers that were also listed in the Coastal Resilience Plan. And that was part of my hesitation for using the word barrier, is to try and help the public, when this is announced, hopefully, understand that we're not talking about putting a wall in the harbor. We're talking about, the various efforts that we can make on the town property on the land to help reduce the impact of flooding. Peter, you also had a comment?
Yeah, just thought that flood management was too vague. We should spell out what we're doing so people know, even if it scares them a little bit. I mean, we know from Remain that, you know, a majority people are alarmed and a majority people are supportive of government efforts. So it seems like, you know, the sample that they took, people trust us. So.
Thank you, Peter. Sarah?
Thank you. Yeah, I agree with some of that wordsmithing. We all saw from, you know, the promotion of the coastal resiliency plan. The plan itself includes so much, but every single piece of publicity showed the giant wall in the water that is of, like, you know, very future potential, not, you know, it's the furthest from being an actuality right now. And there's so many things in that plan that were like, you know, sooner. So just made me think of that immediate response people get. So just, I agree with that wordsmithing. The comment I wanted to make, and I don't know if it's now is the time for that, or if this is like an offline thing, was some of the discussion that's on page 26 with the environmental justice piece. I have some ideas for wording that and where to get some more information. I think it talks, if you're limited on words, it talks a little bit too much about how inaccurate the census data are, which is true. But I think there's really great data from the schools, especially about the language diversity and those pieces to get some of that information that's, you know, kind of better, more factual. And then I think that's also a great place we have found in terms of getting what the languages are that you want to translate things into. And then I think being really careful about, in this piece with environmental justice, not saying we're going to reach out to those people and those people, because it's all part of our community. So I really feel like I'm happy to like help with any wordsmithing, and I am not an expert in this, but I just feel like thinking more along the lines of like reaching out to all aspects of our community and just kind of, instead of othering people, kind of making it like we're really trying to make this something for everyone. So just rethinking some of this wordsmithing, and I'm happy to help with that piece.
Thank you, Sarah.
So not to, I don't mean to turn this into an offline thing, happy to talk about it here, but if you did have anything written up, Sarah, I'd happily take it, included in the discussion with the Arcadis once we're going back to rewrite these sections totally.
I can write something up. I was away last week, so I didn't have a chance to read through this until yesterday, so I didn't have a chance to write anything else, but I'm happy to help.
Appreciate it.
Vince?
Thanks. So just in the project description and how it's going to be set up and the communications part of it, the planning effort of it, and the how it's going to be implemented for design and retrofits. Does anyone have any questions there? Because these are kind of the implementation side of things that we need to discuss in order to get buy-in from CZM.
Thoughts or questions from committee members? I'm not seeing any, Vince, if you want to go on to the next section, and as you said, we can definitely provide feedback in the future as well.
Exactly, yeah, just get it out in the open. If something occurs to people afterwards and they want to email on this, fine, I'm happily take comments. We've got time on this one. I could move on to section 6 if people are interested.
Yep, go ahead.
Okay, I'm just going to zoom out. Just making it. So my questions here, the public benefit and public interest. This is the other side of how to get buy-in. We obviously know that the main interest is in reducing flooding. So it's how to put it out there and how to put it across, and how to make what might be a long piece of infrastructure acceptable. And I'm going to be very specific in this. we also have to be super, super sensitive to the downtown character and the historic preservation aspect of this. This is going to be a massive tie-in. It's how do you maintain local character while also providing resilience. I don't mean to, it's never caused problems between me and Holly, but it could. I have to try and make the place resilient. She has to try and keep it looking as it does. But this is the kind of question that I don't have a good answer for yet, because it's why I work so closely with Holly, just to make sure that we don't have issues in this front. It's how do we put that message out there is the biggest question I have.
Holly?
Thank you, Madam Chair. On that note, Vince, and the benefit of the committee as well as the public, over the last few years, obviously with the adoption of the Secretary of Interior standards for flooding and adaptation, there's been a big push in the preservation world to adapt more resiliency measures, standards, what have you, that don't interact with the historic character of historic places. And actually, I just printed off yesterday, there is a very well known now, she's a preservationist, she's an attorney, she's been hired for with the Advisory Council on Historic Preservation. Her name is Sarah Bronin. You can actually look at her on LinkedIn. And she just came out with adapting national preservation standards for climate change, which is something that I'm going to be diving into a little bit more. But just wanted to put it out there that this isn't new, but this is a trend that's happening, and I'm very happy to see that. And I think there's going to be more aspects of just the preservation world being more, I guess, adaptive to resiliency measures that, again, yes, our historic character is very, very important. We want to make sure it's done correctly. So thank you for that, Vince. No pressure.
I know.
So Vince, I wonder if it would be appropriate here to mention that the study that we had done, through Holly, I don't mean that we had it done, but the town had done through Holly, the guidelines for resilience, and I'm blanking on the name, Holly.
Resilient Nantucket.
Yes, thank you. They mentioned that here, working in concert with those concepts, and also the hazard mitigation aspect of it. Both of those plans are integral to the success of what we would want to do downtown.
So, on that note, Madam Chair, I just want to mention that reason why we received the MVP grant to create those design guidelines was just like what Leah had said, is the effort for Massachusetts through the MVP program to make sure that it's replicatable to other locations within the Commonwealth. And with the fact that we were the first one to really create those design guidelines based on the newly adopted standards from the National Park Service was just awesome. I haven't heard of any other communities at this time, but it can be replicated in other communities, which I know is what MVP looks for.
Thank you, Holly. And I don't know if there's an aspect of that we can emphasize here, that, the work that we're doing is applicable to other historic waterfronts. I don't know if that carries any weight with CZM, but we can try it.
So one of the other things that is probably worth mentioning, partly in this section and partly in the next section that I have questions over section 10. I know I'm jumping between section 6 and section 10 here in the same question, is the partnerships. We're going to have to pretty much work with a lot of groups. And I think one of the key groups, aside from the big names like Steamship Authority, because this is about getting access there essentially, or maintaining access there, but it's also getting buy-in and support from groups like the Chamber of Commerce. The Chamber of Commerce basically work with every business in the area. It's our downtown areas where the businesses are. Then there's within that there's a couple of big players, as I'm sure people know, like Nantucket Island Resorts that own a lot of the property down there. So we're going to have to work with some big names like those as well. Trying to make sure that we can also get not just feedback from this committee. Feedback from this committee is going to be extremely important, but because it's effectively an area that looks right into the harbour, making sure we can work with Harbour and Shellfish Advisory Board, that's going to be a big one. north end and south end of the kind of main works zone and little spots in between. We're going to have Land Bank, NCF, and other big property owners as well. So it's some of those are going to be represented here, but making sure we can satisfy a lot of those needs as well. Because one of my fears, I'm an ecologist, I have to say it, is that we go off, we create a wonderful downtown flood barrier, we've created this wonderful piece of civic infrastructure, oh, and we've starved a wetland in the middle of it. I can't do that. So I just want, sorry, Jen has her hand up, Mary.
Yeah, Jen, go ahead.
I didn't mean to interrupt you at all, Vince, but I think that what you just made, the point you made as far as, we're doing a storm barrier, storm adaptation, whatever you want to call it for the downtown. I think whatever is going to be successful for this project is going to have to incorporate those, the hard pieces and the ecological value, especially because you can use those pieces for storm water mitigation. And I think that's your argument and description going in, is how you use what already exists or potentially create new opportunities for, say it's Washington Street Extension and the properties that the land bank owns. There's things there you can already use to help mitigate storms and potentially enhance and keep ecological value. And I do think that it'll be interesting to see how CZM words this RFP when it comes out this year, but because of the most recent, and I've said this before, I know the IPCC report that says that you can't do hard armoring without the green infrastructure pieces tied to it. It's just not an acceptable way to operate it anymore. And I think all these grants are going to adapt to that. So I think you're on the right track, and I think we'll have to weigh that. How do we protect infrastructure and put the natural pieces in there as well.
Thank you, Jen.
Seeing as how kind of partly covered what I was going to say for section 10 anyway, with the partnership side of things, the project management partnership section, not to ask anyone to put their hand up in a public setting, like in a public meeting, can you please start considering amongst your own organizations and who you represent or other organizations you might be part of or whatever, to see if we can get some buy-in who might be interested in at least offering a letter of support. That's one way of doing it. But also because I don't mean to pick on anyone in particular. It's just an organization I did work for in the past. Joanna's here. She works for Murray Mitchell Association. They have property right on Washington Street, right in the downtown area. Just to be able to, for people like her or NCF or anyone to be able to think, well, okay, how's this going to impact us? How do we work within this, and what support can we offer? It's that partnership element that I want to be able to show and demonstrate quite clearly that the community is interested at this stage and potentially behind it. I just want to put that in people's minds as kind of a little seed to plant and see how that one develops.
So Vince and Matt, this is also for your ears. Should we be thinking about asking the select board for a letter of support for this grant?
Yes.
Okay.
That's my 2 cents.
Yeah. Peter?
What's the deadline for that letter of support? Because Harbor and Shellfish Advisory Board meets the first Tuesday and third Tuesdays of the month. Town meeting is May 2nd. And if town meeting goes 2 nights, we may not meet. So we need time to, I would need time to tell our board that. I certainly can't do it by email because of open meeting laws. So how much time do we have?
If I can, Mary?
Yep.
So nice and simple. They haven't even put it out, the RFP, so we don't know yet. So we don't know what the deadline will be. The way that it's run in the last few years is that they've typically done about 6 weeks turnaround from the time they put out the request. So that if they put it, and what they'd wanted to do this year is put it out sooner, so that they had a much longer lead-in time of closer to 2 months or more. That they probably won't make that kind of time frame this year, but I could expect around 6 weeks is what I'll be anticipating at the low end of things. So we would just need to include any letters of support, that we might be able to get, collect, gather, whatever, once we put the packet together for submission. And that would probably be so middle of June, end of June, that kind of time frame.
Great. I'm glad we're seeing this now so that we can begin thinking about that and drafting those requests or letters as the case may be. So thank you, Vince, for bringing it to us at this stage.
No worries. So that kind of gets to my very last question or request or feedback, I guess, from the committee, kind of at the 100,000 foot level. From what people have been able to go through with this, are there any major observations of things that are good, bad, indifferent, want to see more of?
I don't know if it is relevant to the scope, but just the overall economic impact that the downtown faces if it becomes non-functional for any amount of time is, it's huge. So if you're looking at cost benefit, the potential benefits from the mitigation efforts are huge. And, hopefully that is something that, is favorable for our application.
So just so that everyone has a better picture of this. So what we had in the CRP, that line that went through the downtown area and took in bulkheads and beach berms and raised roads and such, that is kind of just a concept. That was just an image. What I'm hoping for this is to get to a higher design percentage, something, if I get lucky, in the region of 30 to 50% for the sake of argument, so that we would have something we could proceed with for better grants along the way. This is probably going to be a stepping stone to get to a federal grant for finished design, permitting and construction, but I'm not going to try and give anyone the illusion that's going to happen quickly. This might by itself take 1 to 2 years to do this feasibility and design to get it to that level. And then we'd probably have to shop it around for a couple of years or longer. And then that'll be another 1 to 2 year design process to get federal money, or if we ever get to that stage. So just to put it out there, we are quite some time from any construction phase of this. I have no way of putting a timeline on it, but I would think if we got lucky and if everything worked out in our favor, 5 years. If everything goes against us and we hit roadblocks along the way, or if there's an economic downturn, 10 years. But that's the crystal ball gazing I'm going to do, because I have no real idea.
Then the other sort of big picture thought is that I had is at the early design stage, it's better to encompass as many aspects of the project or the widest footprint that we can, so that we design a harmonious solution. And then when we get to the implementation phase, it's easier to break that up into small projects that can be done with different funding sources or at different times. But I'd hope that at the beginning, we're trying to have a coordinated effort so that we don't end up with gaps, or that we don't end up with pieces that don't fit with the rest of it. So that's just a perspective to keep in mind. Other thoughts or comments from committee members? If there are members of the public here who have thoughts on this particular project, we'll welcome some public comment at this point. You can use the raise hand feature, or it's a small group today. You can just unmute and let me know that you have a comment. All right, we're not seeing any. Vince, anything further on the CCM grant information?
No, still a work. Oh, Gary has his hand up, but I'll just finish quickly. Still a work in progress. Going to be looking for a little bit more committee feedback on this one as it progresses. This isn't the only opportunity. So more to come.
Yeah, thank you, Vince. Gary, did you have a comment?
Yeah, I just want to say that I'm sure that my committee, the advisory committee for the non-voting taxpayers, when you're thinking about the importance of the downtown area to people getting to the island, when you're talking about thousands and thousands of seasonal folks who have to come through the waterways to get their cars here, get themselves here. So it's really very important that we figure out a long-term solution to this. So I doubt there'd be any hesitancy at all in my committee putting in a letter of support for this grant process so that we could at least have a feasibility study. So I think that's we'd be glad to consider that. And I might need Vince to come to one of our meetings just to explain it to the folks. So I'm in favor of it.
Thank you, Gary. I think that's an important point, that the diversity of our community is in several different ways. And certainly the seasonal community is an important member of that. So I appreciate the support. Anything else on this topic before we move on? Okay, not seeing any comments. So the next item on the agenda is a discussion of the Shoreline Change Monitoring Program. And the question here is, now that we're gathering data, how should we use it? How should we get it to the public? So thoughts on that, that we can help Vince with the program. And how often should we get that information from Vince? Any thoughts or questions from committee members?
Would it help if I gave a quick overview of what's actually happening?
Yeah, I'm sorry, that would not, that would help. Thank you, Vince.
Okay. So in the Coastal Resilience Plan, it was a priority 2 strategy. It was Shoreline Change Monitoring Program. I have a big sheet on the wall next to me that has everything printed off. You would like it, Holly. It's massive. So it's the Shoreline Change Monitoring Program. We started this in December. We are just putting stakes in the ground on town property or on property where we've gotten permission, like a land bank property at Nantucket. And what we do is, it's just at the moment, the kind of early phase of it, it's putting stake in the ground, going out measuring once a month or after storms, just to find out what the change has been. It's already produced some really, really interesting results. Say at the wastewater treatment plant at Surfside, the sewer beds and the 3 locations we have had there have shown massive change in February and then have stabilized again. We put in another set of stakes at the end of Massachusetts Avenue and one right on the corner of the car park at Chicago Street. And that one has recently shown massive changes. The retreat there has been staggeringly fast, and the sheer drop at the edge is something that has shocked people, but now we can actually put numbers to. Must say that a similar effort has been going on in Baxter Road for years, and this is somewhat different to that. It can be incorporated into it in some fashion, but not the same way. At Baxter Road, that information is largely on private property, and there's questions about publishing information from private property. So that is something that I don't know about yet, if that should be part of it, but certainly we have enough monitoring locations around the South Shore at this point where we can start using it in some fashion. So the question that I have is quite simple. How should I present this information? Is it something that I should put into a report that Morgan, the Coastal Resilience Technician, and myself can present periodically to the committee a couple of times a year? I don't know. Could it be put on a website and updated there, and committee members just look at it and ask questions every once in a while? I don't know. This is the kind of feedback I'm looking for at the moment. If it's on the town website and it's monitored that way, that's one thing. But I just have to also make sure that people understand that the stakes in the ground and pulling string is the kind of initial phase of the plan. We are working on the kind of secondary phase where we buy an engineering level GPS that can monitor retreat as well, but it can catch other information that we can't currently catch, like elevation change. So that put that in there too. So once that comes online, that could just be a much more simplistic thing to update a report or the town website.
Thoughts or comments from committee members? So one of the things that occurred to me was it's probably best to wait until we have at least 12 months of data so that we can see if there's a seasonal pattern, and then we can interpret the following data based on whether or not it conforms to that seasonal pattern. I hear a lot about people saying, well, the beach will build back up in the summer. It always goes away in the winter. But the beach and the bluff are 2 different aspects. And I don't know if this data at this point can address that. Sarah?
Yeah, sorry, I froze for a minute, so you might have already said this, Vince, I apologize, but how what's the duration of the data that you have? Is my first question.
It's mostly monthly information at the moment.
I
and
mean, when did you start? Like, how long a period of time do you have?
we set most of the sites up between December and February, so not much. The best I'd have would be about 5 months.
So based, you know, I think when I came back in, sorry, Mary was just saying about the seasonal cycle. So I think my recommendation would be a report of some sort. I think if you post the data at a monthly cycle, it can be misinterpreted because it does change so frequently. So I would say after like I would say 3 years, but I mean, if you want annual data to be posted, I would post it with a report so there's a narrative to go with it. So that would be one suggestion, to just show both an annual, like a full year of the rejection and then build back. I think if the goal was to look at, change over time, then ideally there would be some quarter report that was written after multiple years so that you could see the annual cycles as well as the seasonal cycles. And then my other suggestion would be to compare with the previous data that were collected in this way that I'm blanking on his name, Jim. I don't know if anyway, they had shown some of or like mimic what they did in their reports, which was after, I think, a decade. I don't have it right in front of me. I mean, I have it on my computer somewhere, but I feel like it would be good to show, because they have a period of data and then we're collecting similar data, not the exact same spots, but I'm imagining that they're probably similar. I think there were like 4 sites only around the island. So there was like South Shore, it was like Maya Comet, and then Codfish Park, and I think there was somewhere out on the western end. Sorry, it's like a few different things I was talking about, but those would be my quick recommendations. So
if I might, Mary,
Yes.
I don't know about the reports you're talking about. If you find them, please send them. I'd love to see them.
Yeah, so they're the ones that Sarah Oaktai was helping to monitor, but it was
Oh, Sarah's frozen. Gary, we'll get to you in just a minute. Let's see if Sarah's video catches up. Or perhaps not. Gary, I guess go ahead.
Okay, I'll stop talking if Sarah gets unfrozen. So Vince, how many sites are we talking about? 10, 15, 25, 50?
At Tom Nevers by the park, I think we have 5. At the airport, we have 3. Nonantum, at the corner of Nonantum, right by Stones Beach area, there's 1. Surfside by the wastewater treatment plant, 3. Then at end of Nantucket Road, 2. So what's that, about 10?
Okay,
10 individual spots.
So it's a manageable number. So that's the first question I had. The second question is, I assume that you and Morgan or whoever will be monitoring the results on a monthly basis, right? You'll be collecting these statistics or not.
Yeah, at the moment, that's what we're doing. And at the moment, we're just putting it into a table. The question is how to report that.
Right. So I guess my thought is that we have the sites. You are going to be collecting the information. I, for one, wouldn't mind our committee being able to see, even on a quarterly basis. I think would be premature to go out to the public because of what some of folks here have said, that it taketh away and giveth, and taketh away and giveth, back and forth. But at least from my point of view, you're going to collect the statistics anyway. So, and if we're talking about 25, we could do it either in a chart, or either columnar chart, or just, and we could see every quarter, and it would be interesting, and we could chat about it if something looks very unusual or not. But I think we don't have to go to the public right away, and maybe not for a year, or maybe not for every other year, but I personally wouldn't mind, since we have the information anyway, and you're going to be collecting it, I wouldn't mind taking a peek at it, once a quarter. And people, if we don't want to do anything about it, all we have to do is, that's interesting, let's move on.
Thank you, Gary. And just for background, the way that we've been getting reports to date has simply been in the form of a storm report. So when there's a storm and there's erosion, then Vince tells us. But that's sort of event driven and gives the opportunity to miss the big picture of a gradual change or a trend. You might hear about the storm, but not hear about it building back up, for instance. Vince, I have a question, and pardon me for being very, very simple. Where exactly is the shoreline that you're measuring to from the stakes?
So it's the edge of the coastal bank. So if I'm just going to use Chicago as the example at the moment, because people have seen it on Facebook and people have driven out there to look at it. It's where the sheer drop is. So the simple way that this method works at the moment is we just put some stakes in the ground, measured 20 feet from the start date. And then when we go to remeasure, go to that stake and go out and then measure to the nearest foot. It's 1 foot increments, which isn't very good. And it's just where the drop off is. We don't have any rolling banks in any of the measurement area at the moment, but then you have to make a determination of where the edge of the rolling bank would be, but they're all sheer at the moment, so that makes it easy.
So we're not measuring the width of the beach at all. We're just simply measuring to the point of the drop off. So that's an important thing to keep in mind. So there's no seasonality to the edge of the cliff that doesn't build back up.
No, not unless we get a big sand event that would push it up against it and a dune would form. It's not beyond the bounds of possibility. Unlikely, but
yeah. Well, good to know. So that puts a little bit different character on it. So my comment about seasonality is not really relevant.
I don't mean to disagree with you, but one of the things that I'm hoping to draw from this study is to see what areas have seasonal erosion in them or have a constant erosion rate. I don't think I'm going to get one, but that's the kind of numbers that we'll be able to tell after a few years. But at this early point, I have no idea. I would just be guessing.
So it sounds like our main objective so far in the less than 6 months that we've been doing this is to discover large erosion spots and to monitor all the spots to see what their erosion is. Do we need to do anything more than what Gary is suggesting, which is take a peek at the data every few months? And I mean, I'm not sure that there's a public benefit. I think it is important that any data that is published comes with a narrative, as Sarah was saying, to explain, what they're looking at, because I mean, my first impression for shoreline change monitoring was that it was going to the water line, and it's not. So people need to understand that.
I guess in that context, I should probably explain it a bit more. So the locations that we've chosen are all at-risk public infrastructure type things. So we use the airport fence as one of them. At Tom Nevers, it's obviously a public park. The sewer at the corner of Nantucket, we're looking at a road edge where there's a turn where we might see an erosion event that could take that corner away, and how to plan appropriately for it. At the wastewater treatment plant, that's obvious. There's a couple of sewer beds that are at risk. And Nantucket, at the end of Nantucket Road, it's both the car park and the end of Nantucket Road where it turns onto Ames. So the locations that have been chosen so far have been public property or other property where we can get permission, or there's it still applies. There's a public infrastructure need. I haven't gone to say the middle of smooth hummocks and asked the land bank to measure a piece there. That's their property, but if there's no real, it's would be unfair to call it recreation land. It might be, but there's no major public infrastructure there. It's land bank property. If I did the same on NCF property, it would be nice, but what would that tell us? It's kind of more pertinent to NCF to manage their property as they will for their needs. I'm looking at public infrastructure here for the most part.
But again, not at beaches. not measuring the change in the beach. You're
Oh, no.
measuring it, yeah.
There's a different way of
land
doing
base,
that.
right, yeah.
But no, at the moment, it's just where the bluff edge is, and the bluff edge is relevant to when we might have to, say, retreat a road. The width of the beach is a different seasonal aspect that I can't account for too much yet. So that's the way they're looking at it in relation to infrastructure and where the bluff edge is. The other thing that might be relevant to the committee is, or kind of for context for understanding, is you might remember at Baxter Road, there's one metric that says that if the bank edge, the same thing I'm measuring here, gets to within 25 feet of the edge of the road edge, then that's one of the triggers for road relocation. We haven't gotten that far yet, but that's the idea to understand where do we do the retreat. And it makes sense that 25 feet would be one of the measures at Baxter Road, given the height of the bank, etc. But I don't know that 25 feet should necessarily be applied to other locations for a retreat plan because there's a much shallower bank or a lower bank. That's another thing I don't have an answer for yet.
And getting a little bit off topic, but how would we get that answer to what the trigger point should be at a specific location? I think the sewer beds, they do have a trigger in their plan somewhere, but the other locations, I'm not aware of anybody who's responsible for that.
I think we're getting to a bit of an end point here where I think a report would help people.
Matt?
I think the Baxter was done by engineers, based on the safety of the height of the bluff and this, the undercutting and the safety of the road. I'm not sure, I'm not sure they did an engineering study of it, et cetera. I just think they probably said that's probably about as safe as it can be, so and I mean, I'm not sure what they based it on, but it wasn't just picked, it wasn't picked by the select board or by Libby or anybody else. There was someone that knows about this stuff that sort of told us that.
Thank you, Matt. Peter?
Yeah, Vince, I think you should add for monitoring, I think you should add the Nantucket Beach parking lot because that has the potential to disappear fast and people drive right up to that bank like they do at the Cisco parking lot, but that's owned by the land bank. You could definitely track that, and it's going to get, as we know in Nantucket, the erosion is faster, it's higher. They've lost as much as, over the last 15 years, they've lost as much as 50 feet a year. And it's something that people can see. And I think it's important that whenever you report to us, that you update the report, on CRAC's page on the town's website, so people can see that. And you have the narrative and they understand why we're doing this, and that, you're not necessarily going to see great results, or huge erosion in 1 year, but, for the people who have bought into what we're doing and support it, and they're going to wonder what we're doing and not going to know unless they attend a select board meeting when we're doing a report or attend this meeting. And so if it's on the website, we're being transparent and saying, okay, we've lost this much. And at these points, this is how far it's come. And, and then have an explanation about a simple generic explanation about how the beach disappears in the winter, it comes back in the summertime, and generally the island is moving north-northwest in that way because on the North Shore, there's more accretion than there is erosion annually, just so I think, so people can be a part of it. Otherwise, we're this board over here that does this thing, and that's what I think.
I'm a little unsure. Is Chicago Street the public parking lot in Nantucket, or are those two separate locations?
It's whatever that is when you come to the end of Nantucket Road, and just before you make the turn onto Ames Ave, you turn down that dirt road, and they have some porta potties, and there's a lot, in the summertime there's a lifeguard there, and usually a ramp onto the beach. And if you're in Nantucket a lot, or if you just watch that area a lot, you can see how rapidly it's moving back. Lorinda LeCain's house is the first house on the left on Ames Road, And they I think have moved once, and they're not going to be able to move again. And so I think it's a place where you're going to see changes quicker than the other places that Vince is talking about.
So, Mary, would you mind if I shared screens for a second? I got the town
go ahead.
GIS
Yes,
maps.
please.
I'm also just realizing maps will be very important in this report as well. So because I've just given verbal descriptions. So this is the end of Nantucket Road, there's Ames Avenue, and this is Chicago here, going on to Macy Road here. This grayed out section here is the car park that people call Chicago Street. So I'm just going to show people where the two monitoring locations are. So one is right here on town property. This is a town parcel, and here's the old road corridor. So we put it right in here. This is the one for the end of Nantucket Road. It crosses this section here. The other one is right at the end at this where this coastal bank is here, right parallel right next to the car park. So it's the old road corridor here, and this parcel that the town owns that I'm measuring across. It kind of goes from in a line like this, roughly speaking, if that's it's on the top of that bank. But that's as close as I could get to the road corridor without impeding people getting by. So that's where those two locations are. It's not, I can't do direct measurement in the car park with stakes. I can't put stakes in the ground. I could measure from back here, but then I'm pulling tape 100 and something feet. Well, not now anymore, but the point is, this is where the two locations I was able to pick out that wouldn't get vandalized either, that they were kind of out of public sight, would be a pleasant way of putting it. They're the kind of two that I have in the mat. They're the only two I have in the Nantucket area. And I'm also going to say quite openly, I'm not done. We're going to be looking for more locations as well.
Thank you, Vince. I had the impression that you and Peter were talking about the same place, but having the map on the screen is perfect. Thank you for doing that. Sarah, question?
Sorry, when you stopped sharing, my mute moved. Thank you. Sorry, I'm having weird internet stuff, but I think, Vince, two things, like the map really, really helps. So one thing that made me think of is if we're not ready to publicly share data yet, because it's so early, is maybe to share the methods and have almost like a short article or blog post kind of feel that describes the methods and what you're doing and has a map of the locations. Because I think people find stakes or they find something, and I know you're trying to make sure they don't see them, but be like, hey, it's a way of people knowing that we're monitoring, the big we are like monitoring this, so I think something like that would be really helpful. And maybe that was already said, but I got kicked off Zoom twice. So the other thing would be, now that you've explained the methods and where the survey locations are, I would say this does not compare to the shoreline change stuff that I was mentioning from before. This was more from the bank to the water line. So
Okay.
It's not comparable, but other than showing where maybe weak locations are, so kind of forgive that for me not fully understanding.
No, I have to freely admit, I've just been explaining this. A report obviously will go quite a distance here.
Thank you for sharing the map. I appreciate it.
Peter?
Yeah, Vince, hopefully whatever map you use is more up to date than that, because those lots in front are all underwater now.
The town GIS system is what it is.
Yep.
So actually, that's not a bad idea. One of the things that we're investigating is maybe the use of drones. So maybe that might be a way to go about it.
I think the visual just has so much more impact than a table of numbers, especially when it's something that people can go for themselves and see. So having an overhead shot, periodically, taken, better than the satellite images that we get, but locally produced and locally relevant would be wonderful. Joanna?
Thanks, Mary. Vince, so I have been, again, sort of an offline thing. I'm going to figure out how to do this properly. I would like to volunteer to help with this in the context of Acclimate. Okay, so they have a PR person who's doing all their social media and would be 100% willing to to post all of this stuff as part of their social media strategy, because they kind of adopted coastal resiliency as something they want to educate the public about. So if we can create content and feed it to them, they'll post it, and then the rest of our member organizations here can share. Because it seems that one of the things we're lacking is an effective distribution model, right?
So I
Go
don't
ahead,
mean to,
Yeah.
sorry, Mary, after you.
I think we might be headed in the same direction, so that there is in the town's budget a new position starting in July for an outreach person that the Natural Resources Department will be able to use. And yes, I think that's been identified as an important feature that we haven't had, especially through the Coastal Resilience Plan process. The ability to reach the public through the town's social media channels was somewhat limited. Vince, did you want to add anything to that? And then we'll go to Jen.
One tiny thing, Coastal Resiliency Advisory Committee is a member of Acclimate, and Mary is the representative on Acclimate. Just have to make that publicly known.
Great. So so we can figure out how to best strategize on how to do that.
Yeah, thank you for mentioning it, Joanna.
You're welcome.
Yeah. Jen?
Thank you, Mary. I was just going to, Vince, you mentioned the possibility of a drone for this monitoring work, and I was going to push on that a little bit, because one of the things that we've been exploring is using drones to do the elevation modeling work within salt marshes, and that would be really valuable on the beaches as well, because kind of that, the beach and dune piece, you could do both at the same time and kind of get it, Mary's interest in what the beach profiles are doing. You could do it at the same, you could potentially get the same data at the same time. We've explored trying to do that beach modeling out on CO2, and it's just hard to get people out there at the right time during the right tide cycles and cover all the area and get the transects done the right way. But a drone might be the way to do that. So it's just interesting for further maybe discussion, collaboration, etc.
Yeah, no problem. I can just add to one more piece of information, if that's right, Mary. 2 staff members in Natural Resources Department are pursuing drone pilot training, or that's what they call it anyway. And Morgan is one of them. She's not complete, and she has to go do off-island work to learn to fly it and control it and do it as per FAA rules. So there's a lot to do, and we're not there yet. But it's certainly something that's in the pipeline, as they say.
That sounds great, Vince. Christy, please go ahead. Christy,
Hi, just a comment. Hi, everyone. I just wasn't sure if the monitoring program for the shoreline referenced any historical data, or is it just strictly looking forward from here on in?
Well, what we're doing at the moment is we had started this, and I suppose we're still continuing looking for new locations all the time. We started in December and really got going in January and February to select those locations and just begin it. That was even before it was properly accepted by the select board. We just got going on it early because stakes and measuring tapes are cheap, and we could. So what we don't have is measurements to the nearest foot in a good historical context. We do have other data from the state, from Morris, Massachusetts Ocean Research, information system is terrific. It does have good historic data all the way back to 1844 in time chunks, and it shows where the high tide line was, not necessarily the bank edge. So that is good historic information that we can try and incorporate in some way, but it's not accurate enough to the 1 foot increments that we're currently using, or the higher engineering level that we're going to go to in the future. So we can try, but I don't know that we're how accurate it will be. I'd have to look at it more.
Yeah, I might just, if I can follow up, it just might be nice to offer maybe some sort of historical reference prior to the new options for your data starting December. Maybe just a little preview of kind of how things have gone, so people could get caught up, and it'll show the change of starting in December. Now this is what we're doing. It might just offer some sort of baseline for people to look at, and to actually use the data from back in the day, and even if it's over the last 10 years or 20 years, it would just sort of give people a little start, and then the intro into what's going on now with the shoreline change. Just a thought.
Yeah, we do have the Google Earth Engine time lapse, which shows the changing shoreline of Nantucket. That is on the town's website for under community resilience planning.
Okay.
So that gives people just a very bird's eye view of the last, I think it's about 40 years of satellite images. One of the issues is that the data doesn't transfer very well. So if Vince has a stake in a particular location, if there wasn't a stake there before, then we don't have any data for that particular location. It's hard to say that in the past at that location, certain things happened.
Understood. Yep.
But I think, that there's a variety of historical data available, or historical information. And I don't know that I should really call it data in this context. And yes, I think it does help to have that. So thank you, Christy, for bringing that up.
Sure.
Vince, any further comments you want to add to that?
Yeah, just simple question. So for committee members, if that's all right, Mary, it sounds like a report is the way to go. Some historical information in it, an overview with maps of what's being done, why the locations were selected, and then a table showing the measurements, and showing where each individual stake is on the ground. Makes sense?
Yeah.
So then that'll be a report for the committee. I don't know when I'm going to bring it to the committee, probably within the next month. I don't know. I'm guessing.
I would say grants are more important at the moment.
Thanks. So, okay, there's indeterminate timeline, but something that I'll generate for the committee. So not to ask it too much of a direct question, how am I going to get feedback? Am I just going to get emails from the committee members on what they think of the report, or would it be discussed in open session, which would all then mean the report would have to be put in a packet?
I would imagine that perhaps sometime this summer, having returned to this discussion with your draft report or final report in hand would be appropriate. Any other comments from committee members? Okay. Anything further on the subject of the Shoreline Change Monitoring Program? And I, for one, am very glad to see that it is in place and we are getting, real information. All right, moving on to public comment. Is there anyone from the public who has a comment on something either on or off the agenda today? Again, you can use the raise hand feature or just unmute and let me know. And I'm not seeing any. So we'll move on to approval of minutes. Vince, can you put up the minutes from March 22nd?
One moment.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think I had anything to add to these minutes. I think Peter even put the link in himself.
Vince, I think this was the one where I noticed that there were 5 members listed as present, but there's a vote later on that shows 6 voting. And Jen, correct me if I'm wrong, was this a meeting that you joined just a few minutes after? Were you there in March?
Oh, I think so.
It's the one where Steve McKenna talked about the CCM grants.
No, I was not at that meeting.
Okay. I'm not sure if it was Fritz or Ian.
It was Sarah.
It was Sarah. Sarah's names were on there.
I was present.
Okay, so we need to note that Sarah was present, and that resolves. Were there any other comments on the minutes, corrections or additions? If none, then I would take a motion to approve the minutes of March 22nd.
So moved.
Thank you, Gary. Do we have a second?
Second,
Thank you, Matt. Roll call vote, Gary Beller,
Aye.
Sarah Boyce,
Aye.
Peter Bryce, Matt Fee,
aye.
Jen Carberg,
Abstain.
Joanna Roach,
Aye.
and Mary Longacre, aye. Thank you. And we also have minutes from April 5th.
Mary, the only thing I added was the meeting recording.
Okay. Any comments or corrections on the minutes from April 5th? If there are none, then I'll take a motion to approve.
So moved.
Second,
Thank you, Janet. Second, thank you, Matt. Roll call vote, Gary Beller,
Aye.
Sarah Boyce,
Aye.
Peter Bryce,
Aye.
Matt Fee,
aye.
Jen Carberg,
Aye.
Joanna Roach,
Aye.
and Mary Longacre, aye. Thank you all. New Business Committee, Natural Resources Department reports. Vince had presented an update to the Select Board on April 6th, along with Arcadis. Vince speaking more specifically about the actions to date for the Coastal Resilience Plan, and Arcadis presenting on the Design Thinking Workshop. Vince, did you want to add anything or recap anything from that?
No, it was quite simple. I presented 3 slides where I put all 40 recommendations on the screen to kind of have the visual impact, and then just highlighted out the ones that were in underway or in review in some fashion. Then on the 3rd slide, I had the ones, the outcome objectives from the Design Thinking Workshop and how they tied up with specific Coastal Resilience Plan recommendations. I can send that to the committee members. It was also in the packet information from that Select Board meeting.
Yes, thank you, Vince. Other committee reports or anything else from Natural Resources under this section? Okay, if there are none, discussion of upcoming meeting dates and topics. So just in general, always happy to take suggestions for topics for an upcoming meeting. Our next meeting would be scheduled for May 10th and then May 24th. Those would be our dates in May. Nothing really to adjust for that, fortunately. So if there are no further questions or comments, we'll take a motion to adjourn. Vince?
One small one. Today was a lot of me talking, but it was a lot of feedback that I needed, and I want to thank the committee members for that one. That was very, very useful for me today for the putting out information on the grants, getting information back on the CZM, and getting a direction for what to do with the data for the Shoreline change program. I thank you, everyone. I greatly appreciate it. I'm sorry if I spoke a lot, and I'm sorry if it was a bit boring, but I needed that.
Thank you, Vince. We always appreciate the being able to be involved and provide input.
You're not boring, Vince.
Do we need a motion? Vince is
Move
not
to
boring.
adjourn. We gotta stop Vince from talking. Move to adjourn.
All right, we have a motion to adjourn. Second from Joanna. Thank you. Roll call vote. Gary Beller,
Aye.
Sarah Boyce,
Aye.
Peter Bryce. Peter? I'll take that as an aye. I heard sort of a noise, but maybe the audio is a little
Oh,
distorted.
I'm not on mute. Aye. How's that?
Yeah. Matt Fee,
Aye.
Jen Carberg,
Aye.
Joanna Roach,
Aye.
and Mary Longacre, aye. Thank you all. We'll see you in May. Oh, don't forget town meeting.